Captain Jake Morrison stared at the star chart floating above his command table. The human research ship Pathfinder had been out here for 3 months, mapping the empty space between human territory and the war zone. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Lisa Grant from her communication station. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "There are signals coming from the Zephyrian Keth battle zone." Jake walked over to her station. "Battle communications?" "That's what I thought at first," Lisa said, frowning at her screens. "But listen to this." She played the audio through the bridge speakers. The sounds were alien. One set of clicks and whistles that Jake knew belonged to the Zephyrians. Another set of deep rumbles from the Keth Coalition. Both species had been at war for over a century. "Sounds normal to me," said Ryan Brooks, the navigation officer. He was a big man with gentle hands that could plot courses through the most dangerous space. Just two sides planning to kill each other. But Dr. Alex Turner, their xenobiologist, looked troubled. He was older than the rest of them, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. "Captain, may I analyze these signals in my lab?" "Ahead, Doc." Alex disappeared into his laboratory. The bridge fell quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Jake had served with most of this crew for 2 years. They were good people. Lisa had joined them fresh from the academy. Ryan had been flying ships since he was 16. Alex had studied alien species longer than anyone in human space. An hour later, Alex returned. His face was pale. "Captain, we need to talk privately," Alex said. Jake led him to his ready room. "What did you find?" Alex sat down heavily. "Those signals aren't battle communications. They're coordination instructions." "What do you mean?" "The Zephyrians and Keth aren't fighting each other. They're working together. The encryption patterns are identical. Someone is giving both sides the same type of orders." Jake felt cold. "That's impossible. They've been at war for 100 years. "Have they?" Alex asked. "Or have they just been putting on a show?" Before Jake could answer, Lisa's voice came over the comm. "Captain, you need to see this. We're getting more signals." They rushed back to the bridge. Lisa had decoded several more transmissions. On her main screen, she showed 2 fleet movements. The Zephyrian ships were moving in a complex pattern. The Keth ships were moving in the exact same pattern, just from the opposite direction. "It's like a dance," Lisa whispered. "They're not trying to destroy each other. They're trying to meet at specific points." Maya Davis, their chief engineer, had joined them on the bridge. She was small and tough, with oil-stained hands and a mind that could fix anything. "I've been monitoring their weapons fire," she said. "The energy signatures are wrong." "Wrong how?" Jake asked. "They're not using their best weapons," Maya explained. "Both sides have plasma cannons that could end this war in a day, but they're using old laser systems that barely scratch their armor." Jake sat down in his captain's chair. His mind was racing. "Are you telling me this whole war is fake?" "Not fake," Alex said slowly, "but controlled. Someone is managing both sides." Ryan pulled up a tactical display. "Captain, look at this. I've been tracking their battle reports for the past month. They're fighting, but neither side ever gains a real advantage. Every time one side gets close to winning, something happens to even things out." Jake studied the data. Ryan was right. The war had been going on for over a century, but the front lines barely moved. Millions of ships had been destroyed. Billions of people had died. But neither the Zephyrians nor the Keth had ever gotten close to victory. "There's something else," Lisa said quietly. "I've been picking up a third signal. Very faint. It's not Zephyrian or Keth. Who is it? I don't know. The encryption is unlike anything in our databases. But, Captain, these third signals always come right before major battles, and they go to both sides. Maya crossed her arms. Someone is pulling the strings. But who? Ryan asked. And why? Alex looked grim. I have some ideas, but we need more evidence. Jake made his decision. All right, people. We're going to investigate this quietly. Lisa, I want you to monitor all communications in this area. Maya, modify our sensor so we can't be detected. Ryan, plot us a course that keeps us hidden but lets us observe both fleets. Captain, Alex said, if we're right about this, we could be in serious danger. Whoever is controlling this war won't want witnesses. Then we'd better be careful, Jake replied. But we can't ignore this. If someone is manipulating a war that's killed billions of people, we need to know who and why. Over the next few days, the Pathfinder moved like a ghost through the battle zone. They watched Zephyrian and Keth fleets engage in what looked like fierce combat. But now that they knew what to look for, the truth was obvious. The battles were theater. Ships were destroyed, people died, but it was all carefully managed. Neither side ever committed their full strength. They fought just hard enough to make it look real. Captain, I found something, Lisa announced on the fourth day. That third signal source. I've traced it. Where? It's not coming from any ship. It's coming from a space station hidden in the asteroid field between the two fleets. But, Captain, the design doesn't match any known species. Jake felt his stomach drop. Unknown aliens? It gets worse, Alex said, reading from his tablet. I've been analyzing the casualty reports from both sides. They're lying about their losses. The real numbers are much higher. How much higher? Triple, maybe more. And, Captain, most of the casualties aren't military. They're civilians on planets that get liberated by one side or the other. The bridge fell silent. Jake understood now. This wasn't just about a fake war between two alien species. Someone was using the war as cover for genocide. Sir, Ryan said quietly, what do we do? Jake looked at his crew. They were scared, but they were ready to follow him. We find out who's behind this, and then we stop them. But as Jake said the words, he wondered if 5 humans in one small ship could really take on whatever force was powerful enough to manipulate 2 galactic empires. They were about to find out. The Pathfinder drifted silently toward the mysterious station, carrying the only people in the galaxy who knew the truth about the war. The Pathfinder moved slowly through the asteroid field. Captain Jake Morrison kept his eyes on the main screen as they approached the hidden station. It was huge, bigger than any human space station, but it looked old. Very old. How long has this thing been here? Jake asked. Dr. Alex Turner studied his readings. The metal composition suggests thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands. That's impossible, said Ryan Brooks from his navigation station. The Zephyrians and Keth have only been spacefaring for about 500 years. Exactly, Alex replied grimly. Maya Davis worked at her engineering console, making sure their ship stayed invisible to sensors. Captain, I'm reading massive power signatures from that station. Whatever they're doing in there, it requires enormous amounts of energy. Lisa Grant monitored communications from her station. I'm picking up more of those coordination signals. They're definitely coming from the station, and they're going out to both fleets right now. Jake watched the tactical display. Sure enough, both the Zephyrian and Keth fleets were changing course based on the new signals. They're setting up another battle, he said. In the Kepler system, Ryan confirmed. That's where the Zephyrian colony world Harvest Prime is located. Alex looked sick. 50 million civilians live on that planet. Not for long, Lisa said, quietly, reading the decoded messages. The Keth fleet is being ordered to cleanse the planet after they drive off the Zephyrian defenders. Jake felt anger building in his chest. And the Zephyrians? They're being told to stage a fighting retreat. Make it look good, but don't actually stop the Keth forces. Maya slammed her fist on her console. 50 million people are going to die, and both sides are in on it. We have to warn them, Ryan said. With what proof? Jake asked. Who would believe us? And even if they did, both governments are probably compromised. Alex nodded. If this has been going on for a century, the conspiracy goes all the way to the top. For the next week, the Pathfinder stayed hidden and watched. The battle for Harvest Prime played out exactly as the mysterious signals had ordered. The Zephyrian fleet put up a brave fight, but retreated at the crucial moment. The Keth forces landed on the planet. Within hours, the reports started coming in. Terrorist resistance had forced the Keth to use extreme measures. Cities were burning. The death count climbed rapidly. This is sick, Lisa said, tears in her eyes as she monitored the news feeds. But Jake was studying something else. Look, at the casualty reports from the space battle. The Zephyrians lost 30 ships. The Keth lost 28. So it's always like that. I've been going through old battle records. The losses are always close to even. Sometimes the Zephyrians lose slightly more, sometimes the Keth, but it always balances out over time. Alex looked up from his research. I've found something else. The weapons technology both sides use. It's not native to either species. What do you mean? The basic designs are too similar, and they're more advanced than either species should be able to build on their own. Someone has been supplying both sides with weapons. Maya had been quietly working on something for days. Now she looked up with excitement. Captain, I think I can get us closer to that station without being detected. How? I've been studying their sensor grid. It's designed to detect ships moving at normal speeds. But if we drift very slowly using minimal power, we might be able to get close enough to scan the interior. Jake considered it. It was dangerous, but they needed more information. Do it. Over the next 2 days, the Pathfinder drifted closer to the ancient station. They moved so slowly that it took hours to cover distances they could normally cross in minutes. But Maya's plan worked. The station's sensors ignored them. I'm getting interior scans, Alex announced. Captain, you need to see this. The main screen lit up with a cross-section view of the station. It was enormous inside, with dozens of levels. But what caught Jake's attention were the creatures moving around inside. They were tall and thin, with pale skin and large heads. They moved gracefully, almost floating, and there were thousands of them. Unknown species, Alex confirmed. Definitely not Zephyrian or Keth. Their body structure suggests they're very old, maybe evolved beyond normal physical limitations. Are they the ones controlling the war? Ryan asked. Look at this, Lisa said, pointing to another section of the scan. Those look like command centers, and there are beings from other species there too. Jake studied the scans more carefully. Lisa was right. Among the pale aliens, he could see figures that looked like Zephyrians and Keth, but they were moving differently than normal. Their movements were too coordinated, too mechanical. Mind control? Maya suggested. Or something like it, Alex agreed. Captain, I'm also detecting some kind of energy collection system. It's massive. It covers most of the lower levels of the station. Energy from where? Alex was quiet for a moment, studying his readings. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. From the planets below. "Captain, they're harvesting something from the populations during the battles and massacres." Jake felt sick. "Harvesting what?" "I'm not sure. But the energy spikes correspond exactly with the casualty reports. The more people who die in fear and pain, the more energy the station collects." The bridge fell silent. Finally, Ryan spoke. "They're feeding on death. Not just death," Alex corrected. "Suffering, fear, pain. The energy readings spike highest when populations are terrorized before they're killed." Jake stood up from his captain's chair. "So this whole war is just a way to generate food for these things?" "It appears so. And, Captain, I'm detecting similar energy signatures from other parts of the galaxy. This might not be the only operation they're running." Lisa looked up from her console. "Captain, I've been analyzing their communication protocols. I think I can tap into their network without being detected." "Do it." For hours, Lisa worked to break into the alien communication system. When she finally succeeded, what they found was worse than anything they had imagined. "Captain, they call themselves the Architects, and this war is just one of dozens they're running across the galaxy. They've been doing this for thousands of years." "How many people have died?" Jake asked. "Billions, maybe trillions. They treat entire species like livestock." Alex had more bad news. "Captain, I've found references to humanity in their communications. They know about us." Jake's blood ran cold. "What do they know?" "They consider us a threat. Our psychology is apparently too chaotic for them to predict or control easily. They've been keeping us isolated while they decide what to do with us." "And?" Alex looked grim. "They've decided. There are plans to drag humanity into this war within the next few months. They want to use us as a wild card to make the conflict more chaotic and generate even more suffering." Jake sat back down, his mind racing. 5 humans on one small ship had stumbled onto a conspiracy that involved multiple galactic civilizations and had been running for thousands of years. The creatures responsible had technology far beyond anything humanity possessed. But they also had one advantage. The Architects didn't understand humans very well. They couldn't predict what humans would do in a crisis. "All right, people," Jake said finally. "We need to get this information back to Earth, and we need to warn the Zephyrians and Keth even, if their governments are compromised." "How?" Maya asked. "I don't know yet, but we're going to find a way, because if we don't, humanity is going to be next on their menu." The Pathfinder began its slow retreat from the station, carrying knowledge that could change the fate of the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison could not sleep. For 3 days, the Pathfinder had been racing back toward human space, carrying the most important intelligence in galactic history. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw those pale creatures in their ancient station, feeding on the suffering of billions. Dr. Alex Turner had not left his laboratory since they escaped the Architect's station. Jake found him there, surrounded by data screens and empty coffee cups. "Doc, you need to rest." Alex looked up with red eyes. "I can't rest, Captain. Not after what I've learned." He gestured to his screens. "I've been analyzing everything we recorded. It's worse than we thought." Jake sat down. "How can it be worse?" "The Architects aren't just running the Zephyrian-Keth war. I found evidence of at least 15 other conflicts across the galaxy, all with the same pattern. Species that should be allies are fighting each other. Wars that should have ended decades ago keep going." "All of them controlled by the Architects?" "Yes." And Captain, I've calculated the energy output from their harvesting operations. They're not just feeding themselves, they're building something. Building what? Alex pulled up a complex diagram. I'm not sure, but the energy requirement suggests something massive. Maybe a weapon, maybe a ship. Something that requires the life force of entire civilizations to power. Before Jake could respond, Lisa Grant's voice came over the comm. Captain, we've got a problem. I'm detecting ships following us. Jake rushed to the bridge. On the main screen, he could see 3 ships in pursuit. They were sleek and silver, with a design he had never seen before. Zephyrian? Keth? He asked. Neither, Lisa replied. The design is completely unknown. And Captain, they're gaining on us fast. Maya Davis looked up from her engineering station. Our engines are already at maximum. Those ships are faster than anything in human space. Architect ships? Ryan Brooks suggested. Has to be, Jake said. They know we've seen too much. The pursuing ships opened fire. The Pathfinder shook as energy beams missed them by meters. Evasive maneuvers, Jake ordered. Ryan threw the ship into a spinning dive, using the gravity of a nearby planet to change course. The architect ships followed easily. Captain, Maya called out, I'm reading massive power buildup in the lead ship. They're charging some kind of super weapon. Time to impact. 30 seconds. Jake made a desperate decision. Maya, can you overload our engines, create a massive energy pulse? Sir, that could destroy us. Those ships will definitely destroy us. Do it. Maya's hands flew over her controls. Engine overload in 10 seconds. Everyone hold on. The Pathfinder suddenly blazed with energy. Every system strained to its limit. Then Maya released the built-up power in a single massive pulse. The energy wave hit the architect ships just as they fired their weapon. The space around them filled with explosions and electromagnetic interference. When it cleared, the architect ships were gone. Did we get them? Ryan asked. I don't think so, Lisa said, studying her sensors. I think they retreated, but our energy pulse probably damaged their systems. Good, Jake said. How long until we reach human space? 2 days, Ryan replied. But Captain, our engines are badly damaged from the overload. We're running on half power. Alex emerged from his laboratory with a grim expression. Captain, I need to tell you what else I found in the architect database. They gathered in the Eye conference room. Alex activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. The architects have been manipulating galactic civilization for over 50,000 years, he began. They're older than any species we know about, and they don't just feed on suffering, they study it. Study it? Jake asked. They're trying to understand the nature of consciousness and emotion. Each war they create is like a laboratory experiment. They test different conditions to see how various species react to stress, fear, and despair. Maya looked sick. We're laboratory rats to them. Worse, we're crops. They harvest our emotional energy to power their technology and extend their lives. But, Captain, there's something special about humanity. Alex changed the display to show human space. Most species are predictable. The architects can model their behavior and control them easily. But humans are different. Our emotional patterns are too chaotic. Our decision-making process is too random. That's why they've kept us isolated, Lisa realized. Exactly. They've been studying us from a distance, trying to figure out how to control us. But they're having trouble. Human psychology doesn't fit their models. So what's their plan? Jake asked. Alex's expression darkened. They're going to use us as a chaos factor. They plan to manipulate humanity into joining the Zephyrian-Keth War. Our unpredictability will make the conflict more violent and chaotic, generating more energy for them to harvest. How do they plan to manipulate us? False flag operations. They'll stage attacks on human colonies and make it look like the work of one side or the other. Then they'll offer to help us get revenge. Ryan leaned forward. When? Soon. I found preliminary orders in their database. The first attacks are scheduled for next month. Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, stars streamed past as they raced toward home. We have to warn Earth Command. Will they believe us? Maya asked. They have to. We have proof. But Alex looked worried. Captain, there's one more thing. The architects have agents among other species. Individuals they've captured and modified with neural implants. These agents look and act normal, but they're completely loyal to the architects. You think they have agents in human space? I don't know. But we have to assume they do. We can't trust anyone until we know for sure. The next 2 days passed slowly. The Pathfinder limped toward human space on damaged engines, while the crew prepared their evidence. They had recordings, energy signatures, decoded communications, and detailed scans of the architect's station. Captain, Lisa announced as they approached the Sol system. I'm being hailed by Earth Defense Command. They want to know why we're broadcasting emergency codes. Put them through. The face of Admiral Chris Parker appeared on the main screen. Jake had served under Parker years. Ego and trusted him completely. Captain Morrison, what's your emergency? Admiral, we need to meet in person. What I have to tell you can't be transmitted over open channels. Parker studied Jake's expression. You look like you've seen ghosts, son. Come to Earth Command immediately. I'll clear you for priority landing. 6 hours later, Jake stood in a secure briefing room at Earth Command headquarters. Admiral Parker was there, along with General Linda Foster, the head of Earth Intelligence, and Dr. Kate Ross, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology. Jake presented their evidence methodically. The communications intercepts, the energy readings, the scans of the architect station, the decoded database information. When he finished, the room was silent for a long time. Finally, Admiral Parker spoke. If this is true, it changes everything. We know about galactic politics. It's true, sir, Jake said. I stake my career on it. General Foster leaned forward. You're telling us that every major war in the galaxy for the past 50,000 years has been artificially created by these architects? Yes, ma'am. And they're planning to drag humanity into their feeding operation? Within weeks, Dr. Ross had been studying Alex's biological data. The neural implants you described, could they work on humans? We don't know, Alex admitted. Human brain structure is different from other species, but we can't take the chance. Admiral Parker made his decision. We need to brief the President and the Security Council immediately, and we need to start preparing defenses. Sir, Jake said, there's something else. We have to warn the Zephyrians and Keth. Their people don't know their governments are compromised. How? Do we do that without revealing our knowledge to the architects? I don't know, sir, but we have to try. Billions of innocent people are dying in a war they don't understand. General Foster nodded grimly. And if we don't stop the architects, humanity will be next. As the meeting broke up, Jake realized that the hard part was just beginning. They had discovered the truth, but now they had to figure out how to use it. How do you fight an enemy that has been manipulating galactic civilization for 50,000 years? The answer would determine whether humanity would join the ranks of the architect's victims or become the force that finally brought their ancient tyranny to an end. 3 weeks had passed since the Pathfinder crew delivered their shocking evidence to Earth Command. Tony Lee, Earth's best communications specialist, had been working around the clock in a secure facility deep underground. His mission was simple, but dangerous. Break deeper into the Architect communication network without being detected. Tony was young, barely 26, but he had a gift for understanding alien technology. His fingers moved across multiple keyboards as he worked through layers of encryption that had protected Architect's secrets for thousands of years. "Got it," he whispered to himself as another security barrier fell. New data flooded his screens. Across the facility, Dr. Kate Ross was examining biological samples that Captain Morrison's team had managed to collect during their escape from the Architect station. Under her microscope, she could see tiny devices that looked like metal threads woven through brain tissue. "Admiral Parker," she called through the comm system. "You need to see this." Admiral Parker arrived within minutes, followed by General Foster and several other senior officers. Kate showed them what she had found. "These are the neural implants," she explained. "They're incredibly sophisticated. They don't just control behavior. They can completely rewrite personality and memory." "How do they work?" General Foster asked. "They connect to every major neural pathway in the brain. Once installed, the subject believes they are acting of their own free will, but they're actually following programming implanted by the architects." Admiral Parker studied the microscopic devices. "Can we detect them in living subjects?" "That's the problem," Kate said grimly. "These implants are nearly invisible to standard medical scans. We would need very specific tests to find them, and the subjects would have no idea they were compromised." "So anyone could be under Architect control?" "Anyone who has been captured by them, yes. And according to the data Captain Morrison brought back, they've been abducting key individuals for decades." Meanwhile, Tony Lee had made another breakthrough. "Admiral," he called over the comm, "I found a list of compromised individuals. You're not going to like this." They gathered around Tony's workstation. On his main screen was a database containing thousands of names, photos, and biographical information. But these weren't random people. They were leaders, military officers, scientists, and politicians from dozens of different species. "These are all people who have been captured and implanted," Tony explained. "They've been returned to their original positions, but now they work for the architects." Admiral Parker scanned the list. "How many humans are on there?" Tony's face was pale. 17, including 2 members of the Earth Senate and a general in the Space Navy. The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. If the architects had already placed agents in human government and military, how could they trust anyone? "We need to test these people immediately," General Foster said. "But we can't let them know we're testing them," Admiral Parker replied. "If they are compromised, they'll report back to the architects." Dr. Ross nodded. "I can develop a discreet scanning procedure. We'll disguise it as routine medical exams." While the medical team worked on detecting compromised humans, Tony continued digging through the Architect database. What he found painted an even darker picture of the galaxy. "The refugee camps," he announced during their daily briefing. "They're not what they seem." Captain Morrison, who had been assigned to the investigation team, looked up from his reports. "What about them?" "According to these files, the refugee camps set up after major battles aren't for protection. They're harvesting centers. The architects collect refugees from destroyed worlds and use them for experiments." "What kind of experiments?" Dr. Ross asked. Tony pulled up horrifying medical records. They test different ways to generate fear and despair. They study how long various species can survive under extreme stress, and they harvest the emotional energy produced by the suffering. Maya Davis, who had also been assigned to the investigation, slammed her fist on the table. Those monsters, they're torturing entire populations for science. It gets worse, Tony continued. The energy they collect isn't just used to extend their lives. They're building some kind of massive device. The files call it the harvest engine. What does it do? Admiral Parker asked. I'm not sure yet, but the power requirements are enormous. It would need the life force of billions of beings to operate. Alex Turner, who had been studying architect biology, looked up from his research. Maybe it's a weapon. Something powerful, enough to harvest entire worlds at once instead of relying on wars. Or maybe it's a way to spread their influence, Dr. Ross suggested. If they could amplify their mind control abilities, they could take over the entire galaxy without fighting. As the investigation continued, they discovered that the architect network was even more extensive than they had imagined. The fake war between the Zephyrians and Keth was just one of many operations running simultaneously across the galaxy. Look at this, Tony said, displaying a galactic map. Red dots marked locations of active conflicts. There were dozens of them. Every major war in the galaxy is being manipulated by the architects. How is that possible? General Foster asked. They've been doing this for 50,000 years, Alex explained. They've had time to infiltrate every major civilization. They probably have agents in positions of power throughout the galaxy. The more they learned, the more hopeless their situation seemed. The architects controlled governments, militaries, and entire populations. They had technology that was thousands of years more advanced than anything humanity possessed. How could one species fight an enemy that had been manipulating galactic civilization since before humans learned to use fire? But then, Tony made a discovery that gave them hope. I've found something interesting in their psychological profiles, he announced. The architects have a weakness. What kind of weakness? Admiral Parker asked. They can't understand chaos. Their entire system depends on being able to predict and control the behavior of other species. But some species are more predictable than others. Tony displayed a chart showing different species and their predictability ratings. Most species scored very high, meaning the architects could easily model their behavior, but humans scored much lower. We're the most unpredictable species they've encountered, Tony explained. That's why they've been afraid to include us in their operations until now. Afraid of us? Maya asked. Think about it, Alex said, understanding Tony's point. They've been controlling galactic civilization for 50,000 years by being able to predict how everyone will react to any situation. But if they can't predict human behavior, they can't control it. Captain Morrison felt a spark of hope. So we have an advantage. More than that, Tony said excitedly. I've found references to other species that have caused them problems in the past. Species with unpredictable psychology. The architects call them chaos factors. What happened to these other species? Tony's expression darkened. They were eliminated completely. The architects consider unpredictable species to be a threat to their system. The room fell quiet as the implications sank in. Humanity's unpredictability was both their greatest strength and their greatest danger. It made them capable of fighting the architects, but it also made them a target for complete extinction. So what's their plan for us? Admiral Parker asked. Tony pulled up another set of files. Phase 1 was to study us from a distance while keeping us isolated. Phase 2 is to try to manipulate us into their war system, using us as chaos factors to make conflicts more violent. And Phase 3? Once they've learned how to predict and control human behavior, they'll eliminate us, just like they did to the other chaos factor species. Dr. Ross had been quietly studying the neural implant data. Now she looked up with alarm. I found something else. The implants aren't just for control. They're also for study. Every compromised individual is sending detailed psychological data back to the architects. Data about what? About how their species thinks and reacts. The implants record every emotion, every decision, every thought pattern. The architects use this data to improve their predictive models. General Foster understood the implications immediately. So every person they compromise makes them better at controlling that species. Exactly. And once they have enough data, they don't need the implants anymore. They can predict behavior accurately enough to manipulate entire populations without direct control. Captain Morrison felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. So we're not just fighting for humanity. We're fighting for every species in the galaxy. Yes, Admiral Parker said grimly, because if the architects succeed in building their perfect predictive model, free will itself will become extinct. The investigation team worked through the night, preparing their findings for presentation to the President and the Global Security Council. They had uncovered the greatest threat in galactic history. Now they had to figure out how to fight it. But in the back of everyone's mind was the same terrifying question. How do you defeat an enemy that has been practicing the art of manipulation for 50,000 years? President Sarah Mitchell sat in the secure briefing room beneath the White House, listening to the most impossible story she had ever heard. Around the conference table sat the Joint Chiefs, the heads of intelligence agencies, and the crew of the Pathfinder. For 2 hours, Captain Morrison and his team had presented evidence that challenged everything humanity believed about the galaxy. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, President Mitchell said slowly. Every major war in galactic history has been artificially created by ancient aliens who feed on suffering. Yes, Madam President, Captain Morrison replied. And they're planning to drag humanity into their system within weeks. General Linda Foster leaned forward. The evidence is overwhelming, Madam President. We've confirmed the existence of neural implants in several captured subjects. We've decoded their communications. The threat is real. President Mitchell studied the faces around the table. These were serious people, not prone to fantasy or conspiracy theories. What do you recommend? Admiral Parker spoke first. We need to prepare for war, but not the kind of war they expect. Traditional military strategy won't work against an enemy that can predict our every move. Except they can't predict our moves, Dr. Alex Turner interjected. That's our only advantage. Explain. Human. Psychology is too chaotic for their models, Alex continued. They've been studying other species for thousands of years, but we're still unpredictable to them. That's why they've kept us isolated. President Mitchell nodded slowly. So how do we use this advantage? General Foster had been working on this problem for days. We develop what we're calling chaos protocols, military strategies that are deliberately unpredictable, even to ourselves. How is that possible? Random decision-making systems, explained Maya Davis. Computer programs that generate tactical options randomly. Battle plans that change on the fly based on dice rolls or card draws. Anything that removes human predictability from the equation. You want to run military operations based on chance? Not entirely, Admiral Parker clarified. We maintain overall strategic goals, but we randomize the methods used to achieve them. The architects can predict human nature, but they can't predict random numbers. President Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. What about allies? Can we count on the Zephyrians or Keth? Their governments are compromised, Captain Morrison said, but their populations don't know the truth. If we can get the information to them without alerting the architect agents in their leadership, we might be able to spark resistance movements. Tony Lee, the communications specialist, had an idea. I can hack into their civilian communication networks, broadcast the truth directly to their people. That would expose our knowledge to the architects, Admiral Parker warned. Not if we do it right, Tony replied. I can make it look like the information came from within their own intelligence services. Plant evidence that suggests their own people discovered the conspiracy. Dr. Kate Ross, who had been studying the neural implants, spoke up. There's another problem. We don't know how many humans are already compromised. The implants are nearly undetectable. How do we solve that? I've developed a new scanning technique, but it takes time. We need to test every person in a position of authority. How long? Weeks, maybe months. President Mitchell made her decision. We don't have months. Start with the most critical positions and work your way down. In the meantime, we implement security protocols that assume some of our people are compromised. Over the next few days, humanity began the most secret mobilization in its history. Military units were activated under cover of routine exercises. Scientists worked around the clock to develop new technologies. Intelligence agents spread across human space to identify potential threats. But the most important work was being done by small teams, like the one led by Sam Blake, a former Special Forces operative who now worked for Earth Intelligence. Sam's job was to identify and neutralize compromised humans without alerting the architect network. We have a problem, Sam reported during a secure video conference with Admiral Parker. I've tested 12 high-ranking officials. 3 of them have the implants. Who? Senator Williams from the Defense Committee, General Brooks from the Martian Command, and Dr. Patterson from the Research Division. Admiral Parker felt sick. These were people he had worked with for years. Are you certain? The scans don't lie. But Admiral, there's something else. The implants in the humans are different from the ones we've seen in other species. Different how? They're newer, more sophisticated. And they're not just for control. They're also for communication. The compromised humans are in constant contact with the architect network, which means they know everything we're doing. Not everything. I've been feeding false information to the compromised individuals while gathering intelligence on their operations. But, Admiral, the architects are moving faster than we expected. On the screen, Sam shared intelligence reports that made Admiral Parker's blood run cold. The first phase of the architect plan was already beginning. Human colonies on the frontier were reporting strange ship sightings. Merchant vessels were disappearing. And refugee ships from the war zone were requesting permission to enter human space. The refugee ships, Admiral Parker realized, they're not really refugees. Some of them are, Sam confirmed, but others are architect agents posing as survivors. They're planning to establish bases inside human territory. How do we stop them without revealing what we know? We can't, not completely, but I have an idea. Sam's plan was dangerous but clever. Instead of refusing entry to all refugee ships, they would allow them in but quarantine them for medical evaluation. During the quarantine, Dr. Ross's team would scan every refugee for neural implants. It will tip our hand, Admiral Parker warned. Maybe, But it's better than letting architect agents establish bases on our worlds. Meanwhile, Amy Phillips, one of Earth's best pilots, was leading covert missions to extract intelligence from the war zone. Her ship, the Shadowhawk, was equipped with the most advanced stealth technology humanity possessed. "I'm in position over the Keth refugee camp on Outpost 7, Amy reported during one of her missions. "Beginning scans now." What she found confirmed their worst fears. The refugee camp was not a place of shelter, but a place of horror. Thousands of beings from destroyed worlds were being held in terrible conditions, while architect scientists conducted experiments on them. "My God," Amy whispered as she watched the feeds from her ship's cameras. "They're torturing children." "Document everything," came the reply from Earth Command. "We need evidence." Amy's recordings would later be used to rally support for the resistance, but for now, they served as a grim reminder of what was at stake. The architects were not just manipulating wars, they were destroying the souls of entire civilizations. Back on Earth, President Mitchell was making the hardest decision of her presidency. The evidence was clear. Humanity was facing an enemy that threatened not just their species, but all free-thinking life in the galaxy. But fighting the architects meant abandoning decades of peaceful diplomacy and preparing for a war unlike any in human history. "Issue the order," she told Admiral Parker. "Begin Operation Free Bird." Operation Free Bird was humanity's secret plan to fight the architects. It involved 3 phases. First, identify and neutralize compromised humans. Second, warn other species about the conspiracy. And third, develop weapons and tactics that could not be predicted or countered by architect technology. The first phase was already underway. Dr. Ross's medical teams had identified 17 compromised humans so far. Each one had been quietly removed from their position and placed under security while scientists studied their implants. The second phase began when Tony Lee activated his plan to hack into alien communication networks. Carefully crafted messages began appearing on Zephyrian and Keth civilian networks, containing evidence of the conspiracy and instructions for detecting compromised individuals. The third phase was the most challenging. How do you develop weapons against an enemy that can predict your every move? The answer came from an unexpected source: chaos theory. A team of mathematicians and physicists, led by Dr. Emma Stone, developed what they called entropy weapons. These were systems that used quantum randomness to generate unpredictable effects. "The basic principle is simple," Dr. Stone explained to President Mitchell. "Instead of designing weapons with specific effects, we design weapons that have random effects. The architects can predict human tactics, but they can't predict quantum mechanics. Will they work? We don't know. But that's the point. If we don't know how our own weapons will behave, the architects can't predict them either." As Operation Freebird moved into full swing, humanity began to discover something remarkable. They were not alone in their resistance to the architects. On dozens of worlds, populations were beginning to question the wars that had consumed their civilizations for generations. The truth was spreading, and with it came hope. For the first time in 50,000 years, the architect's perfect control was beginning to crack. But the ancient enemy would not give up without a fight. And when they realized that their carefully laid plans were unraveling, they would respond. With a fury that would shake the galaxy, the real war was about to begin. Sam Blake crouched in the shadows of the architect facility, his heart pounding as he watched pale figures move through the corridors below. The infiltration had taken 3 weeks of careful planning, and now he was finally inside one of their processing centers. "Blake to command," he whispered into his comm device. "I'm in position. Beginning data extraction." 2,000 light-years away, Admiral Parker listened to the transmission with growing tension. Sam's mission was critical to Operation Freebird, but it was also incredibly dangerous. If the architects discovered him, humanity would lose one of their best operatives and possibly reveal their entire plan. "Copy that, Blake. Proceed with caution." Sam made his way through the facility using routes mapped by Tony Lee's intelligence gathering. The architect complex was enormous, built into the core of an asteroid in a remote system. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy were held here, all of them subjects in the architect's twisted experiments. As Sam moved deeper into the facility, he began to understand the true scope of the architect operation. This wasn't just about harvesting energy from suffering populations. They were conducting detailed studies of every species in the galaxy, learning how to predict and control their behavior with perfect accuracy. "Command, I'm seeing something you need to know about," Sam whispered as he peered into a massive chamber filled with biopods. "They have representatives from every known species here, including humans." Admiral Parker's blood ran cold. "How many humans?" "At least 50 that I can see. All of them hooked up to monitoring equipment." Sam used his scanner to record everything. He could see. The humans in the biopods were all people who had disappeared over the past few years. Explorers, traders, researchers who had simply vanished without a trace. Now Sam knew where they had gone. "Blake, can you extract any of them?" "Negative. The security is too tight, and removing them might kill them anyway. But I'm recording everything. This evidence will be crucial." Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Shadowhawk, Amy Phillips was conducting her own dangerous mission. She had volunteered to spread the truth about the architect conspiracy to resistance cells that were forming across the galaxy. Amy to Zephyrian. "Resistance Cell 7, she broadcast on an encrypted channel. "Package delivered to coordinates you provided." The package was a data burst containing everything humanity had learned about the architects. Within hours, it would be in the hands of Zephyrian civilians who had begun to question why their century-long war never seemed to end. "Received, human friend," came the reply. "The truth spreads like fire among our people. Many now refuse to fight the Keth. Our leaders grow desperate to maintain the illusion." Amy smiled grimly. The plan was working. Across the galaxy, populations were waking up to the reality of their manipulation. But the architects were not passive observers. "Amy, you've got company," warned her co-pilot, Danny Chen. 3 ships, approaching fast. Unknown configuration." Amy looked at her sensors. The ships were definitely architect vessels, sleek and deadly. "They found us. Hold on, Danny." The Shadowhawk dove into the asteroid field surrounding the system, using the rocks for cover. Amy's piloting skills had been honed by years of dangerous missions, but the architect ships were faster and more maneuverable than anything she had ever faced. "They're jamming our communications," Danny reported. "We can't call for help." "Then we'll have to handle this ourselves." Amy threw the ship into a series of impossible maneuvers, using the gravitational fields of the asteroids to slingshot past her pursuers. But the architect ships adapted quickly to her tactics. "They're learning our flight patterns," Danny warned. "Each time we try a maneuver, they counter it faster." Amy realized what was happening. The architect ships weren't just chasing them. They were studying human piloting techniques in real time, building a model of how humans behaved in crisis situations. "Then we stop being predictable," Amy said, with a grin. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a pair of dice that she always carried for luck. "Danny, I need you to roll these dice every 10 seconds and call out the numbers." "What?" "Just do it. Roll the dice and tell me the numbers." Danny looked at her like she was crazy, but he did as she asked. 7. Amy immediately changed course based on the number, diving toward the 7th largest asteroid in the field. The architect ships followed, but their formation looked confused. 11. Amy spun the ship 11 times in a barrel roll before changing direction again. The architect ships tried to follow, but they couldn't predict what she would do next. 2. Amy cut all power for 2 seconds, letting the ship drift silently past a massive asteroid. When she restarted the engines, the architect ships had lost her completely. "How did that work?" Danny asked in amazement. "The architects can predict human behavior, but they can't predict random chance. By basing my decisions on dice rolls instead of tactical thinking, I became impossible to track." Back at the architect facility, Sam Blake had completed his data extraction and was preparing to leave. But as he made his way toward the exit, alarms began sounding throughout the complex. "Blake, what's your status?" Admiral Parker's voice crackled over the comm. "Compromised. They know I'm here." Sam ran through the corridors as architect security forces converged on his position. Behind him, he could hear the strange clicking sounds that the architects used for communication. They were coordinating a search pattern that should trap him within minutes. But Sam had spent weeks studying architect tactics, and he had a plan. Instead of trying to escape through the route he had used to enter, he did something completely random. He pulled out a coin and flipped it. Heads meant go left, tails meant go right. Tails. Sam turned right and ran down a corridor he had never seen before. The architect's search pattern assumed he would follow logical escape routes, but by making random choices, he stayed ahead of their pursuit. Flip. Heads. Sam turned left into a maintenance shaft. Flip. Tails. He climbed down instead of up. Each random. Decision took him further from where the architects expected him to be. Within an hour, he had reached an emergency escape pod and was flying toward the rendezvous point. Blake to command. Package delivered. Data extracted successfully. But as Sam escaped, the architects were realizing that their carefully laid plans were falling apart. For 50,000 years, they had maintained control through their ability to predict and manipulate other species. Now they faced an enemy that seemed to thrive on chaos and unpredictability. In the central command chamber of their main station, the architect leadership gathered to discuss the crisis. They were tall, pale beings with enlarged heads that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns as they communicated. "The humans have revealed our operations to 17 species," one of them reported. "Resistance movements are forming across the galaxy." "How is this possible?" another demanded. "Our predictive models should have accounted for any possible..." Response. "The humans are the chaos factor we have long feared," came the reply. "They do not behave according to any pattern we can discern." "Then we must accelerate our timeline. Activate the harvest engine immediately." "But it is not yet complete. We need more energy to power the full activation sequence. Then we will take it by force. Order all our puppet governments to begin total war. Every ship, every soldier, every civilian. Burn the galaxy if necessary, but give us the energy we need." Across the galaxy, the architect commands went out. Suddenly, the managed conflicts that had simmered for decades exploded into total warfare. The Zephyrian Empire mobilized every ship in their fleet. The Keth Coalition did the same. But this time, they weren't following the careful choreography that had maintained the balance of power. This time, they were fighting to destroy each other, completely. On Earth, alarms rang through every military facility as sensors detected the massive fleet movements. Admiral, Captain Morrison reported from the command center, "We're detecting Zephyrian and Keth fleets moving toward human space. Combined force of over 10,000 ships." Admiral Parker felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. The architects had accelerated their timeline. Instead of slowly manipulating humanity into their war system, they were going to force the issue with overwhelming military power. "All right, people," he announced to the command staff. "This is what we've been preparing for. Signal all fleet units to implement chaos protocols immediately, and get me a direct line to President Mitchell." "Yes, sir." "Admiral, what about our allies? The resistance movement Sam and Amy have been supporting." Admiral Parker looked at the tactical display showing enemy fleets converging from all directions. "Signal them all. Tell them the time for hiding is over. If they want to break free from the architects, this is their only chance." President Mitchell appeared on the main screen within minutes. "Admiral, what's our status?" "The architects have played their hand, Madam President. We're facing the largest military force in galactic history, but we have advantages they don't expect, such as, they're fighting the war they know how to win. We're going to fight the war they can't predict." "God help us all," President Mitchell said quietly. "Give the order, Admiral. Let chaos reign." Across human space, military units received the strangest orders in the history of warfare. Instead of following careful battle plans, they were told, 6 months after the fall of the Architect Empire, Dr. Alex Turner stood in a medical facility on the former Architect Station that had once controlled the galaxy's suffering. Now it served as a rehabilitation center for the millions of beings who had been subjected to neural implants and psychological manipulation. "How are they progressing?" asked Dr. Kate Ross, who had become the galaxy's leading expert on treating architect mind control. Alex reviewed the medical charts of former puppet leaders who were slowly recovering their true personalities. "Better than expected. Once we remove the implants, most subjects regain their original memories within weeks. The Keth Admiral Chen has even volunteered to help establish the new Galactic Council." And the Zephyrian officials. Similar results. Governor Wells is working with human diplomats to establish trade agreements that would have been impossible during the war years. It was remarkable how quickly the galaxy had begun to heal once the artificial conflicts ended. Species that had been enemies for generations were discovering they had more in common than they had ever imagined. In the command center of the station, now renamed Freedom Base, Captain Morrison coordinated the ongoing search for remaining architect facilities. His new ship, the Sam Blake, carried the most advanced detection equipment humanity could build. "Captain," reported his communications officer, "we found another facility in the Outer Rim. Looks like it was used for weapons development." Morrison nodded grimly. Even though the main architect leadership had been defeated, there were still hidden bases scattered throughout the galaxy. Some contained dangerous technology that needed to be secured. Others held prisoners who had been missing for decades. "Plot a course and signal Commander Phillips. We'll need her expertise for this one." Amy Phillips had become the galaxy's premier expert on architect technology recovery. Her pilot skills and courage made her perfect for the dangerous missions to abandoned facilities. "On my way, Captain," came Amy's voice over the comm. "The Freebird is ready for another house call." Meanwhile, on Earth, President Mitchell hosted the first Galactic Freedom Summit. Representatives from over 50 species had gathered to establish new principles for interstellar relations based on transparency and cooperation rather than manipulation and conflict. "The old ways are dead," President Mitchell announced to the assembly. "For too long, our civilizations have been puppets dancing to strings we couldn't see. Today, we choose to write our own destiny." The summit had not been without challenges. Many species were still dealing with the psychological trauma of learning their entire histories had been fabricated. Some groups wanted revenge against their former manipulators. Others struggled to trust anyone after centuries of deception. But humanity's role as mediators had proven crucial. Their unpredictable nature, which had made them so dangerous to the architects, also made them ideal diplomats. Other species couldn't predict human responses, which meant negotiations were genuinely open-ended rather than following predetermined scripts. Admiral Parker, now serving as Earth's representative to the new Galactic Council, had helped establish the core principles of the post-architect era. No species would be allowed to manipulate another. All conflicts would be mediated by neutral parties. Most importantly, any technology that could control minds or predict behavior would be banned galaxy-wide. "We've learned the hard way, Admiral," Parker told the assembly, "that the ability to predict and control others inevitably leads to tyranny. Our strength comes from our diversity and unpredictability." The vote to establish these principles was not unanimous, but it carried by a large majority. The galaxy was choosing freedom over security, chaos over control. Dr. Emma Stone had been appointed to lead the new Galactic Science Council, where her expertise in chaos theory helped establish research protocols that prevented any one group from gaining too much predictive power over others. "We must never again allow science to become a tool for oppression," she declared to her fellow researchers. "Knowledge should liberate, not enslave." Tony Lee, meanwhile, had become the galaxy's communications coordinator, ensuring that information flowed freely between all species. His network made it impossible for any group to control the flow of truth as the architects had done. "Information wants to be free," Tony often said. "The moment we start restricting it, we start down the path." The architects walked. Maya Davis led the effort to dismantle architect technology and repurpose it for peaceful uses. Her engineering teams had converted dozens of former weapons facilities into research stations and hospitals. The same technology they used to harvest. "Suffering can be used to heal trauma," Maya explained to a gathering of former architect prisoners. "We're turning their tools of oppression into instruments of liberation." But perhaps the most important work was being done by people like Lisa Grant, who had established the Galactic Truth Commission. Her job was to document the full scope of architect manipulation and ensure that future generations would never forget the price of surrendering their freedom to those who promised order and predictability. "History is written by the victors," Lisa said during one of her interviews with former puppet leaders. "But this time we're making sure it's written by the survivors." The Truth Commission's work was painful but necessary. They documented 50,000 years of manufactured conflicts, false histories, and controlled evolution. The archive they created would serve as a permanent reminder of what could happen when free beings allowed others. The galaxy burned. From his command post on Earth, Admiral Parker watched the tactical displays as the largest war in galactic history unfolded across dozens of star systems. But this wasn't the carefully managed conflict the architects had orchestrated. For centuries, this was chaos. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the Zephyrian fleet," reported Commander Lisa Grant, who had been promoted after her service on the Pathfinder. "Their commander is requesting to speak with you directly." "Put him through." The alien face that appeared on the main screen was scarred and exhausted. Commander Vex had once been a proud officer in the Zephyrian fleet. but now his eyes held the look of someone who had seen too much truth. "Admiral Parker," Vex said in heavily accented English, "my fleet stands ready to join your forces against the true enemy. How many ships, Commander?" 3,000 vessels. All crews have been tested for the neural devices. We are clean of architect influence." Admiral Parker nodded grimly. In the past week, resistance movements across the galaxy had seized control of military units, exposing the architect agents among their leadership. The galaxy was dividing into two factions, those who served the architects willingly or unknowingly, and those who fought for freedom. "Welcome to the Alliance, Commander Vex. Transmitting tactical coordinates now." On the bridge of the human flagship Liberty, Captain Morrison coordinated the most unusual battle fleet in history. Human ships fought alongside former enemies, their tactics guided by random number generators and chaos algorithms designed by Dr. Emma Stone. "Captain, the Architect fleet is moving to intercept us at the Sigma Centauri system," reported his tactical officer. Morrison rolled a 20-sided die that had become his most important piece of equipment. 18. "We attack from the Galactic North. Signal the fleet." The combined human-alien armada changed course based on a dice roll, a decision that no computer model could have predicted. Behind them, the Architect fleet adjusted its position, but they were always one step behind the random tactical changes. Maya Davis, now serving as chief engineer for the entire human fleet, monitored the performance of their new entropy weapons. These devices used quantum uncertainty to generate unpredictable effects, from disabling enemy shields to creating temporary wormholes that transported ships to random locations. "All ships report entropy weapons online and functioning," Maya announced. "Admiral, the architects won't know what hit them, but the architects had their own surprises." Deep in their central command station, the ancient beings were preparing to activate their ultimate weapon. The harvest engine had been under construction for thousands of years, powered by the suffering of countless civilizations. Energy reserves at 70%, reported one of the pale creatures. "Sufficient to begin activation sequence." "Do it," commanded their leader, an ancient being whose consciousness had existed for over 100,000 years. "If we cannot control this chaos, we will destroy it." The harvest engine began to power up, its massive form stretching across the interior of a moon-sized space station. As it activated, every sensitive being in the galaxy felt a chill of terror. The device was designed to drain the life force from entire star systems, converting the energy of living minds into power for the architects. On Earth, President Mitchell felt the change immediately. She was in the war room, monitoring the global conflict when a wave of dread washed over her. "Something's wrong," she announced to her staff. "Contact Admiral Parker immediately." "Madam President," came Parker's voice over the comm, "we're detecting massive energy signatures from the Architect home base. They're activating some kind of superweapon." Tony Lee, who had become humanity's primary expert on Architect technology, studied the energy readings with growing alarm. "Admiral, if my calculations are correct, that device could drain the life from every inhabited world within 1,000 light years. How long do we have?" 6 hours until full activation, maybe less." Admiral Parker made the hardest decision of his military career. "All ships, new mission priority. We're going after their home base directly." "Sir, that's suicide," Captain Morrison protested. "They'll have every defensive system in the galaxy protecting that station." "Maybe. But if we don't stop that weapon, every living thing in this part of the galaxy will be dead by morning." The message went out to every ship in the Resistance fleet. Human vessels, Zephyrian cruisers, Keth destroyers, and ships from dozens of other species that had broken free from architect control. Together they formed the largest fleet of free beings the galaxy had ever seen. But standing between them and the architect's station were the puppet fleets, ships crewed by beings who still believed they were fighting their ancient enemies, not knowing they were defending the source of their manipulation. "Admiral," reported Commander Vex from his flagship, "the puppet fleets are moving to intercept. Combined strength of over 20,000 vessels. The odds were impossible. The Resistance fleet was outnumbered 4-1 by ships that were just as advanced as their own. Conventional tactics would result in total destruction. Then we don't use conventional tactics," Admiral Parker declared. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, implement maximum chaos protocols. Every decision, every maneuver, every weapon activation will be determined by random chance." Dr. Stone had prepared for this moment. Throughout the fleet, quantum random number generators took control of tactical systems. Ships moved in patterns that defied military logic. Weapons fired at targets chosen by probability calculations. Battle formations changed based on the roll of electronic dice. The result was beautiful chaos. The puppet fleets, controlled by architect, predictive algorithms, couldn't adapt to the completely random tactical changes. Their carefully planned ambushes failed when human ships suddenly veered away for no logical reason. Their coordinated attacks fell apart when target vessels simply disappeared through randomly activated wormholes. "It's working," Maya reported, from her station. "Their formation is collapsing. They can't predict where we'll be from one second to the next." But the cost was enormous. Random tactics meant that sometimes the Resistance ships made terrible decisions, flying into crossfires or wasting ammunition on empty space. The casualty reports were staggering. "We're losing ships faster than I can count," Captain Morrison reported grimly. "Stay the course," Admiral Parker ordered. "Chaos is our only advantage." As the fleet battle raged, Sam Blake led a specialized strike team toward the architect station itself. Their mission was to infiltrate the facility and shut down the harvest engine before it could complete its activation sequence. "Blake to Admiral," Sam reported as his ship approached the massive station. "Beginning infiltration run. Wish us luck." "Luck has nothing to do with it, Sam. You know the plan." Sam smiled as he rolled a dice to determine his approach vector. "That's exactly the point, sir." The strike team's ships dove toward the station using completely random flight paths. The architect defense systems tried to track them, but the unpredictable movements made targeting impossible. Within minutes, Sam and his team had breached the station's hull and were fighting their way toward the core. Inside the station, the architects were experiencing something they had never felt before: panic. For 50,000 years, they had controlled every variable, predicted every outcome. Now they faced an enemy that seemed to thrive on chaos and uncertainty. "The humans have reached the inner sanctum," one of them reported. "Security forces are unable to predict their movements." "How is this possible?" demanded their leader. "No species can function without logical decision-making processes. The humans appear to be making their decisions randomly. Our algorithms cannot predict random events." For the first time in millennia, the ancient architect leader felt something approaching fear. "Then we must complete the activation immediately. Channel all remaining energy into the harvest engine." The device began to glow with terrible power as it prepared to drain the life from countless worlds. But Sam Blake and his team were already in the core chamber, placing explosive charges on the critical systems. "Charges set," Sam reported. 30 seconds to detonation." "Blake, get out of there," Admiral Parker ordered. "Negative, sir. Someone needs to make sure this thing is really destroyed." As the countdown reached 0, Sam Blake made the ultimate sacrifice. The explosion that destroyed the Harvest engine also took the life of one of humanity's greatest heroes. "Sam, Admiral," Parker whispered as the energy readings from the station went dark. But Sam's sacrifice was not in vain. Without the Harvest engine, the Architect power began to fail. Across the galaxy, their puppet governments suddenly found themselves without orders. Their fleet commanders, freed from mental influence, began to realize they had been fighting a war based on lies. "Admiral," reported Captain Morrison with excitement in his voice, "the puppet fleets are standing down. They're requesting communication." "Put them through." The face that appeared on the screen belonged to a Keth admiral whose eyes were clear, for the first time in decades. "Human Admiral, we have been deceived. Our entire war was a fabrication. We offer our allegiance to your cause." Similar messages came from dozens of other fleets. The revelation was spreading like wildfire through the galaxy. Species that had been enemies,